Drafting of some clauses, and Mr. Moyosore Onigbanjo joins us now. He's also a legal practitioner. Morning, and thank you for coming on today.
Morning, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I haven't seen some parts of this as highlighted, clauses 1, subsection 2, then 3 and 5, where the president just picked some objections to how it was drafted and talked about a lot of other issues. But having gone through it, what do you think of that?
Well, I think the president has taken what I'll call sound legal advice, because if you look at the proposed bill and you consider it along with Section 67 of the Constitution, there is obviously a conflict, because Section 67 gives him a discretion as to whether to address, the National Assembly, whilst in the proposed bill, the National Assembly is obviously trying to remove the discretion. They want it to be mandatory for the address to be rendered on a yearly basis. If those issues which the president raised are not addressed, then you have a conflict between the two provisions. And the position of the law is that where there's a conflict between any law and the provisions of the Constitution, the provisions of the Constitution prevail. And any law or provision that is inconsistent becomes null and void. So what would happen is, if that law is passed, let's assume that the National Assembly can override, override his veto, and they go on to pass the bill, the president will still not be compelled to attend.
Insofar as what? The Constitution,
yes,
Section 67
exactly.
is still there?
Insofar as Section 67 is still there, it might just go to court to ask the court to declare those provisions, which is opposed to right now, as being inconsistent with Section 67.
I was going to ask you just quickly, what in Section 67 makes it discretionary? Is it the word may? The president may attend?
May, generally in interpretation of statutes, contracts, the word may is always seen as discretionary. Whilst where you use the word shall, it has always been interpreted to be a mandate, a command. So if they say the president shall, no discretion, he must carry out the duties imposed under the section.
Does the Constitution guarantee the right of the citizen to request for accountability from its leaders?
Yes, you have to take it on an holistic basis. The Constitution, of course, gives many rights, and also the Constitution gives the citizens rights. It also gives the executive rights. So where there is a specific provision, as in this instance, that says it's discretionary, then nothing can override it, except you amend the Constitution by amending Section 67.
So the members of the National Assembly did not go the right way, is that what you...
The proper way, if they want to compel him, now, it is not by passing the bill in its state, it is but by amending Section 67.
But should they be compelling the president?
Well, if we want
based
to look
on the principles of checks and balances, and
if we want to look at international best practices, Nigeria will not be the first nation in which the president is called upon to address the nation. It's been a very long. You have a long tradition of that in the United States. South Africa does it. Our next door neighbor Ghana does it, and a few other countries. I think in the United States, for example, the president does it almost between January and February. He sets out his legislative agenda for the year. And he also addresses the nation on key issues as security and the economy. It's a way of rendering account to the people. This is what we have done, and this is what we want to do. Of course, I mean, if you want to promote good governance, nobody should object to that.
Okay, but in the cases of South Africa and Ghana, they run a parliamentary system of governance. So doesn't that make it a little different? Because, I mean, it should come naturally when you go
yes,
to debate.
They run a parliamentary system of government. So, but if you don't put the provision there, even though it's a parliamentary system of government, then it doesn't have to give a State of the Nation address.
But if
like in the UK, they run a parliamentary system of government, but there is no requirement for David Cameron to give a State of the Nation address. But what you get is that members of the opposition take him to task on a daily basis on policies of government, which is government is formulating. So by answering those questions, I think they call it parliamentary question time or something. By answering those questions, it gives account on a weekly basis.
So it's not that the parliamentary system necessarily provides that platform because you debate some of those issues naturally.
No, it doesn't provide that platform except you stipulate it expressly.
But then, I mean, looking at this again, who knows what the National Assembly, because if they don't amend Section 67, as you say, if they veto it, the President might just say, all right, no problem, they'll just back off. But that will cost us a lot more brickbats between the executive and the National Assembly, which you could
It's just politics. It just boils down to politics, really.
Do you really, I know that we've somehow asked that question, but do we really see the need for this? Because, I mean, as pointed out earlier, the President seems to do this every year when he's presenting the budget. Aren't they similar?
No, the budget is not the same thing as the State of the Nation address, because in the budget he addresses largely expenditure. But a State of the Nation address, you have to tell us what's going on in the country, for example, with Boko Haram, terrorism issues, what's going on with the subsidy fraud issues, corruption, and just give us an account of what you have done in the previous year and what you intend to do.
How do you see the amendments that the President is proposing to this particular? Do you think that it should be done in the Constitution, or do you think that the amendment that the President is proposing be incorporated into the new law as it's been thought out?
You see, but the President's angle is the President is taking it from an angle that it doesn't want to be compelled.
Because it runs contrary to the Constitution.
Well, legally, yes. But I believe he also has some other altruistic reasons why he doesn't want to be compelled to go there every year. For example, one of the amendments being proposed is that if the President doesn't want to come, he should be allowed to send a representative. You know, it's like an issue of ego between both of them. The National Assembly will not take lightly to being addressed in a joint session by a representative. They want to be given
a representative no less than the Vice President.
Yes, than the Vice President. But to them, it is demeaning. To the National Assembly, it is demeaning. And I will, with respect, side with them on this issue. In the United States, it's the President. Nobody else does it. Because the buck stops at the President's table. So why will your Vice President, if you are not incapacitated, come and tell us about the state of the nation? Is the nation, are we not important enough for you to address us directly?
That's the question now, because that particular provision can also come in, assuming the President is unavailable in terms of maybe he's not well, you know. For whatever reason, would the National Assembly still feel slightly, assuming
if you go on and make it specific that in the event that the President is incapacitated and unable to carry out the duties of his office, then the Vice President should present the State of the Nation address. But right now what you have, it's blank. It's a carte blanche amendment that they propose, that for any reason whatsoever, if the President says he doesn't feel like, maybe he doesn't like the Senate President, he doesn't like the Speaker, then he says, I'm not going there. I'm going to send my Vice President, which really shouldn't be. Because he is the Chief Executive, he is the Commander-in-Chief, of the armed forces.
I'll send the text of the address. That would do, definitely.
Exactly. Or even just send his report. Like we had during the Yaradua time, instead of coming to orally present the budget, some gentleman just showed up at the National Assembly and laid the budget on the table, and it was deemed as having been presented. Surely that was not what the framers of the Constitution had in mind when it said the President shall present a bill, the budget bill, appropriation bill.
Or cause to be presented.
Yes, or cause to be presented, but sometimes you have to look at the intention behind when you draft legislation. What did the drafters, what did the legislation intend? I don't think anybody envisaged or planned for a situation where you just come and just lay the report on the table.
Do you think that we can also have traditions? I mean, we've heard of certain traditions that used to be and have so over the years.
Office.
Well, I don't really think someone in the National Assembly, someone in the President violates the principle of separation of powers, because the National Assembly, they're there. It's a tripod system. Each arm of government is to act as a check on the other. So you have the National Assembly. They have their oversight functions to check on the executive. So for them to ask him to come and give an account, I don't see how that violates the principles of separation of powers. And don't forget, in other countries, other democratic countries, this is done without any rancor. In the United States Constitution, it is mandatory for the President to address the Congress every year.
Oh. Okay, we'll just keep an eye on this and see how eventually, or what happens next, because both the President has suggested some redrafting of some clauses, and the National Assembly says, look, we'll veto this. I guess Section 67 hinges. All of this will eventually hinge or go back to that big section. It's becoming big now, Section 67. Well, thank you for coming on. Moyosore Onigbanjo, a legal practitioner, speaking about this State of the Nation address.